Does the latest 26-page report from the US Treasury expose just how bullish the Treasury is on Bitcoin? The timing of this report is also very, very interesting. So, why is the US Treasury releasing this point report now of all time? And why did they push it out on the weekend? Well, first, we're going to dive in to a little bit about what this report says, and then we'll get into the timing just a bit later. But this was released over this past weekend and published. Obviously, they've been working on it for quite some time and then released it to the general public here. But this entire presentation was worked on and put out there in October earlier this year. But the biggest takeaway from this entire report is that the primary use case that the US Treasury sees for Bitcoin is to be a store of value, aka digital gold, in a decentralized or DeFi finance world. And it's the speculative interest that has grown and see that. So, why the timing now? Why is the US Treasury looking into Bitcoin right this second? Well, it's obvious. They highlight it here. It's this rapid growth that they've seen here in the total crypto market, but also they're highlighting just Bitcoin as well. And obviously, both of them seem to track here pretty hand in hand. But the interesting thing that they do here is they also include stable coins. So you can look here, they highlight the stable coin market cap, then 5 to 166. I believe that is in trillions of dollars here. So, or maybe it's billions. Excuse me. But either way, you see it go from 0 to 166 in 9 years, and then you see Bitcoin do what it does. Bitcoin had a 10x in this 5-year time period where stablecoin market cap had a 35x, it looks like, from this here increase. So the drastic increase that stablecoins has been experienced. Why is the US government keeping track of that? Well, it's because of the association with Tether. The total market cap of stablecoins have been actively increasing, and they're all fiat backed, right? I mean, if you look at Tether here, you can see out their entire collateral backing right here, where US Treasury bills is 68.3 of the total backing there, where they only have a 4% backing to Bitcoin, and their cash equivalents are nearly 84%. So Tether is utilizing the U.S. Treasury to let me zoom in for you guys here so you can see it a little better. But Tether is utilizing U.S. Treasury bills in order to back its stablecoin, and is doing that at a rapid rate. So the U.S. is paying attention now because Tether has a full intertwining with the U.S. dollar, right? So who remembers what happened earlier this year? In August of this year, we had the famous Japanese carry trade. What happened there? Well, Japan, for the first time ever, started selling off U.S. bonds. They've always been playing nice with the United States government, but this time they decided to not. They decided to focus on themselves a little bit, help out the Japanese yen. Well, that created a little bit of disparity in the market. There was the Japanese yen carry trade, where people were utilizing yen to get into the US dollar, and there was a bit of a spread there. And so there was many people utilizing this spread to make a profit. And Japanese decided to raise interest rates by 25 basis points, and it caused the third biggest crash in my lifetime. There was 2008, there was COVID 2020, and then there was the Japanese yen carry trade when the Japanese government raised by 25 basis points. It doesn't really make sense. But if you think about it, Japanese buying the total US bonds and the amount of money printing that we've seen during COVID created this violent swing where inflation is not over yet. We need other countries to purchase our bonds, to purchase our debt, yada, yada, yada. Long story short, the Tether has now intertwined itself with the United States. And basically, if Tether would decide to sell off some of these treasury bills, it could be catastrophic for the US government. But let's get back to the original purpose of what this report said, right? it acknowledged that Bitcoin is digital gold, right? And that's its primary function is a store of value. So I think that it's showing the trends in digital assets growth usage really just increasing dramatically. It's emphasizing the ongoing efforts to harness blockchain and distributed ledger technology by creative, innovative applications. So, it's kind of mixing in digital assets all with Bitcoin, which is unfortunate. And I think that as we're going to highlight as we go throughout this entire live stream here, is that the U.S. Treasury has not determined the difference between Bitcoin and crypto just yet, and they're still getting there. But um, the funny thing is this all also brought out many bears, right? I mean, the former US Treasury Larry Summers calls the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve a quote crazy idea. And it seems that he has said of all the prices to support, why would the government choose to support an accumulating as by accumulating a sterile inventory of a bunch of Bitcoin? There is no reason other than to pander to a general special interest campaign supporters. So basically, Larry Summers is saying here, why are we pandering to the Bitcoiners? Why are we doing this? And there's a select few. They've maybe donated some money, but why are we pandering to this Bitcoin crowd in order to try to what? Gain votes? Like that doesn't really seem valuable here. And it seems like Larry Summers has not undertook the time to understand Bitcoin and the digital scarcity aspect of Bitcoin and utilizing that. But others in the U.S. Treasury have by releasing this port. As we highlighted here, they are looking at it as quote digital gold, and that was highlighted here by the man Brian Cohen as well. But the timing of all this, I think, is pretty peculiar because as we go here, we see that Bitcoin's sitting a little over 100K, just dipped down a little bit beneath 100K slightly today, but we're seeing it, past that 100K mark. So with that recent price explosion, as Forbes so generously calls it here, with the recent price explosion, more eyes are on Bitcoin. 100K was a huge, huge, huge mental barrier. And getting past that mental barrier has now made more eyes go on to Bitcoin. So even with that, we've seen Wall Street seeing that he's got FOMO. We've got Elon Musk saying that, there's a spiraling $36 trillion debt spiral, and that, utilizing Bitcoin to as a strategic reserve is the only way out of it. I've spoken to many Bitcoiners who believe the same exact thing. And this is what Bitcoiners have been spouting for years, is that this debt spiral is out of control, especially since 2020, when we printed 40% of the current money supply in a 2-year time period because of, what went on in 2020. So with that, we have bigger swings up and bigger swings down. And that's what we saw when the Japanese yen carry trade happened earlier this year in August of this year. But back to the U.S. Treasury, labeling Bitcoin as digital gold is monumental because now they're starting to come around to the idea of the strategic reserve, right? I mean, I think that Bitcoin hitting 100K. Look, you get the trends of how Bitcoin is growing rapidly and comparing it to stable coins, and the stablecoin market, showing that the stablecoin market is hand in hand with the US Treasury because of the amount of Treasury bills that we have, I think is a very important thing to highlight as well. Because, now that the US government is intertwined with that, they essentially have no way to really deny Bitcoin and crypto, I guess, to a lesser extent, but they're intertwining with the US government, the total overall macro economy. So they have to start paying attention now. And, this isn't the first time they've released reports on Bitcoin or crypto or digital assets. I mean, they started looking with industry leaders back in March 2nd of 2020. Now, March 2nd of 2020, let's go back to 5 years ago. Let's see if we could get that March. trading view, March 2nd of 2020. So they started doing research, and the price of Bitcoin was right around $8,000 at that time, right? So we're sitting at 100K. The U.S. Treasury started releasing a report where they're going to start working with industry leaders about Bitcoin and digital assets at that time. Well, imagine if we would have implemented the strategic reserve at that time. Now we're more than 10x in this time, but that's nearly beside the point. It seems like they've been working on Bitcoin and learning about quote unquote digital assets for almost 4 years, or over 4 years, excuse me, almost 5 years. And they still have not gotten to the point where it's peer to peer electronic cash and it's strictly a store of value at this point. And, they're going to potentially shift towards more of a peer to peer transactions, something like that in the future. But as of right now, they haven't done that. They've just welcomed the responsible innovations in new technology to improve the efficiencies of the financial system. But there's also a lot of bearish things that, the U.S. Treasury has been putting out as well. So they put out this report over this past weekend, and then from that, they had another report that dropped, just a week earlier that OFAC and foreign partners are utilizing Bitcoin and cryptocurrency digital assets to, quote, evade sanctions. And so obviously the United States wants everybody to play nice. The United States wants everybody to listen to their rule. And if they put on sanctions on Russia and some of the Russian products, they would not like everybody to, essentially utilize ways of or means to get around that, right? But I think it's very curious that they included this and they, did another report on the ability to use Bitcoin to evade sanctions because Bitcoin's an open digital ledger. So, if Russia is conducting trades with, X country and they're trading hundreds of millions of dollars worth of oil, say across borders, and you're utilizing Bitcoin, well, if you see 100 millions of dollars go through in a transaction, in a single transaction over for pretty cheap, right? You can track all these things all on chain analysis because of the just open source nature of Bitcoin. So it is curious that they are going to lump in Bitcoin with all of this. But I think, like I said, I think they're still in the learning phase when it comes to Bitcoin and quote unquote digital assets, learning the difference between Bitcoin and crypto and moving further from that. But I think recognizing Bitcoin as digital gold is one big step in this going forward. Yeah, like I said, I mean, they've been releasing reports for years on end. And here's another one that they've released: crypto assets, the implement implications of for consumers, investors, and businesses. Excuse me here. I'm getting a little gas, I guess, here, but they're basically looking at all of the risks, the markets, and look at how big this risk section is, right? I mean, they have conducting operational risks, risk explorations, and every other section is fairly short except for the risks. Risk section is actually, it looks like it's 15 pages, 25 to 40. So out of this 58-page report, so nearly a quarter of this thing is all about risks. So it's pretty interesting. And they take less pages to do an overview or even give you like a market breakdown, anything like that. The biggest section in this is risk, and that's essentially how I feel the US Treasury has viewed Bitcoin in the past, is that Bitcoin is very risky, the volatility, et cetera, et cetera. And so, the reports coming out of Bitcoin being used for laundering, not laundering necessarily, but to evade sanctions, does not help necessarily with that narrative. But I think, if we go back to the original report here and we just highlight, what they were saying at the beginning of this report on page 2 right away, fourth bullet, that the primary use case for Bitcoin seems to be the store of value, aka digital gold, in a decentralized finance world. I think that's the biggest takeaway from all this, is that the US Treasury is now being forced to look into Bitcoin, forced to look into the benefits of Bitcoin when it comes to putting it as a US strategic reserve and forced to really take some time and analyze the benefits, both the positives and the negatives of Bitcoin, and hopefully in the near future, learn the differences between Bitcoin and crypto. So if this is your first time here, I appreciate you coming. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, tell a friend to tell a friend, and I will see you guys all tomorrow.